Game of Thrones Season 5, Episode 4 is over, but we're just getting started here on Game of Thrones Live on Post-Show Recaps. And now, here they are. It's the Cooper and Darnell of podcasting. I'm Rob Cesternino. Here's Josh Wigler. Josh, how are you?
Is it actually Darnell, or are you just making that up because you also couldn't understand what Bron had said?
I watch it with the closed captioning on, so I'm pretty sure that's what he said.
Darnell.
Yeah.
I guess I look more like a Darnell than a Cooper.
Wait, I thought I was Darnell. I thought you were Cooper.
Oh, I'm Cooper and you're Darnell?
Coop.
Hey, Coop. I'll take it. Whichever one you want to do is fine with me.
Okay. All right, here we go. It is time for our Game of Thrones post-show recap, and we had a doozy of an episode tonight, Josh.
It was a big one. It was a big one for a lot of reasons. Sons of the Harpy. For a while there, kind of like with last week's episode, wondering, why is this called Sons of the Harpy? There's so much other stuff. Like at one point, I was like, shouldn't this have been High Sparrow? Probably would have been more appropriate for this to be High Sparrow. But by the end of the episode, Sons of the Harpy, it fits. And it's bad news for some of our guys. Very bad news indeed.
Damn you filthy sons of harpies!
You son of a harpy!
Son of a harpies.
Yeah, very sad. Very sad news for some people here in Marine.
All right, a lot to get to here tonight on the Game of Thrones post-show recap. We've got the chat room open on postshowrecaps.com. We're taking your questions at hashtag PSRecaps, and then also on our YouTube channel at postshowrecaps.com/YouTube. So much to get to, Josh, and from what I understand, it'll be a busy week on the feedback show and on the Game of Thrones book club.
Yeah, I expect the Game of Thrones book club to be a big one. People who have read the books and watched tonight's episode, I think, are going to have a lot to talk about. And we'll touch on that in a as spoiler-free a way as possible later in this podcast as well.
Okay, so a lot to do here. Of course, if you want to subscribe to our Game of Thrones podcast feed, you can do that on iTunes at postshowrecaps.com/GOT iTunes. And if at any point you want to get one of your questions in for our feedback show this week, you can do that at postshowrecaps.com/voicemail. And just go ahead and leave us a message, or at GOT@postshowrecaps.com. And this week, Antonio Mazzaro is going to be pinch hitting for me on the voicemail show.
Oh, man, Antonio. Antonio is going to have a lot of thoughts as well. I'm excited. I'm excited to dig into this with Antonio.
Which is good, because he's actually one of the sons of the Harpies.
Wait. Oh.
yes.
Now,
son of a
upstate
Harpy.
New York makes a lot more sense now. Anyway, I'm not supposed to talk about it on the air.
All right, there you go. All right, so, Josh, we got to start in Marine here, and we have some casualties here to our crew. It looks like Sir Barristan the Bold, his watch may have finally ended.
His watch may have finally ended. What's the policy here, Rob, when it comes to talking about previews for the next week's episode? Do we talk about that here? I don't know that we've ever really crossed this bridge or not.
I know we talk about it a lot on the Survivor podcast. There's some people that don't even want to watch the previews. I say here, if you have something to say about the preview, just, plant your flag. I'm going to talk about the preview. If somebody doesn't want to hear about the preview, they can stick their fingers in their ears. They can turn the podcast off, God forbid, and do whatever for the next, say, 90 seconds or so.
Sticking your fingers in your ear while you have headphones on seems difficult, but if you can pull it off, if you have bigger ears than me,
you could rupture an eardrum that way. So
that would be bad, unadvisable. But all right, so let me plant the flag. I want to talk about something from the preview very quickly, so we're just going to do that right away. Looks like Barristan the Bold is straight up dead. Looks like Barristan did not survive whatever happened to him here, getting stabbed in the back and the chest. We see him on a slab in the beginning of the preview for next week's episode. So yeah, pour one out for Barry the Bold. Is now Barry the Dead.
He's dead. He's dead.
He's dead.
Had a good boot episode. Had a good, had a nice moment with Danny.
Yeah, he got Obi-Wan Kenobi'd, man. It was tough. He gets to look like a real badass in his final few moments of life. We keep hearing about how Barristan is one of the most badass warriors in the Seven Kingdoms, but we don't see a ton of that. We've seen a little bit of it on the show. There was a great moment, in his first scene in season 2 when he reveals himself to Daenerys. That was really cool. But we don't see much of that on the show. But at least, in his final scene here,
that might have been season 3, Josh.
Was that season 3?
Season 3.
Well,
to pour.
That would be correct. So either way, a little while ago, it had been a minute. But poor Barristan did not work out well for him tonight. And the moment that he is starting to kind of look back and think fondly of the past and his days with Rhaegar, you kind of start to think that maybe something's up.
Yeah. Alex Kidwell in the chat room is #goodbye Grandpa.
Goodbye, Grandpa. Yeah, goodbye.
Yeah,
Grandpa.
well, back in the day, he was Barristan the Bold, but unfortunately, at this point, he's Barristan the Old.
No, come on.
No, I kid. Too soon. Now, Josh, I'm trying to wrap my head around. Danny has about 8,000 Unsullied. Is that fair to say?
Roughly, somewhere ballpark figure, yeah.
Yeah. What the hell happened? Were they off today? Where are these Sons of the Harpies coming from? This underground movement, and the Unsullied is the baddest fighting force in the East. How are the Sons of the Harpies able to take down even a group of 10 or 15 Unsullied?
Well, I think we saw this a couple episodes that we've kind of finally uncovered the Unsullied's kryptonite, which seems to be prostitution. They like to go to the brothel, and that's how you sneak on an Unsullied and you kill him. And there was this scene tonight where the Sons of the Harpy, they come in. I think that they're killing a bunch of the second sons at first. A lot of it, I think it was the same woman who is involved in killing that. What was his name? White Rat or something like that. I forget. Beige Wombat.
I think so.
Yeah, and so she was involved in that. I think that we saw her again tonight. So yeah, these ladies have gotten these Unsullied into their charms.
I can get that they get the jump on a couple of them, that they're distracted.
But I mean, it wasn't like this was all of the Unsullied got wiped out tonight. The Unsullied got trapped in this corridor. They got surrounded. In fairness to the Unsullied, yeah, a lot of them got killed, but basically every Son of the Harpy in that corridor ended up getting killed as well. So it's not like they're rock stars either.
But where are the Sons of the Harpies coming from?
Well, they are rebelling against Daenerys. These are the people that are not thrilled to have her in Slaver's Bay, let alone Meereen. They are not happy with this regime. These are the people that are probably.
Are they the former slaves? Are they the people that were hissing during the execution?
No, these are people who are pro-slavery. These are people who want the old ways to come back.
Are they the masters?
Well, I think that if they're not the masters themselves, then they're people who support the masters. These are they're not tremendous fighters, which we see tonight. They're not the Unsullied. They're not skilled. Their tactics are stealth and ambush and catching you off guard when you're drinking or when you're doing things in your private time. That's when they strike, and they do that because these shadow tactics are basically all they can do. If they challenged Dario Naharis into a street fight in broad daylight with warning and everything like that, it wouldn't go well. So these are people who aren't like the fiercest warriors. These are people who are fighting to get their old ways back, and they're desperate. And desperate times call for desperate measures, and so we're seeing a lot of these scare tactics and shadow tactics from these guys. That's kind of terrifying, and they know their city better than the Unsullied. They know their city better than the Second Sons, so they know which streets to go down and all of that jazz. So it's a tough enemy to fight. It really is.
Did they have all the Harpy masks ahead of time, or did they make them up for this insurrection?
Yeah, that's a good question. Did these just always exist, or is there a group of people that are dedicated to just pumping out new masks?
Because there's a Harpy uniform.
And is there a site where I could buy one?
You want to be a Harpy for Halloween?
For Halloween. I'm glad you said for Halloween. Not
Ask Antonio.
Not generally I don't want to be a Son of the Harpy, but for Halloween I feel like that's a good costume.
But, okay, we're burying the lead here a little bit, and no pun intended. But Sir Barristan is gone. Is Grey Worm dead?
I don't know if Grey Worm is dead. He seems more alive than Barristan. I would say, if I were betting money, I think that Grey Worm is alive. I think that we haven't seen the last of Grey Worm. There's still business to wrap up with Grey Worm and Missandei, I think, before he can go. So at the very least, I think that he's going to be alive long enough to have final words with Missandei. But listen. Is now a good enough time to talk about why this scene is kind of mind blowing for people who've read the books?
Well, I don't really understand, Josh, because you've read the books, you know what's coming ahead of time. So I'm surprised to hear you say you're surprised about anything.
Well, all right. So we're gonna dig into this just a tiny bit, just because it's important. I think it's an interesting thing to kind of note about this season in particular of Game of Thrones. Game of Thrones is usually super faithful to the books that are written by George R. R. Martin. Not always perfectly faithful. There are little deviations here and there. But season 5 has kind of been forecasted as the season where things are going to get fairly noticeably different from where things stand in the books, because the show has basically caught up with the story as it's been published in the books. We're basically right up against the door, both in the books and on the show at the same point in the story. And the show has done some things that have either tipped the hand of what's coming up in the books, or it has done things that the books have not done because they need to start making their own choices. And that has never been more apparent than tonight. And this is, if you're not interested in this sort of thing, maybe skip ahead 2 minutes. But in the books, Barristan the Bold is alive. Barristan the Bold is not dead. Barristan the Bold did not die this way because he did not die at all. So this is a big change on the show that they have decided to kill this character. A lot of people, if you're looking at people who are tweeting me tonight, certainly there are a lot of people who are very upset about this. But it's a huge change from the books, and one of the bigger ones that I can think of for sure.
Is there a precedent for this in the TV show where a character that is still living in the books died on the TV show?
Yes, there is. From minor characters to fairly major characters, without identifying the character, there is somebody in the season 4 finale who didn't make it out alive that is still alive in the books. So it's been known to happen. But with this one, I don't know. This one kind of hurts. This one kind of hurts because this guy still had some really cool stuff to do. And the show's either gonna not do that cool stuff, or they're gonna give that cool stuff to somebody else. But either way, it's sad to see Barristan go before his time.
Well, it does sort of set up the path for Ser Jorah to get back in, because you feel like that both of those guys, and we saw this friction on the show before, where that they sort of have the same job. So Danny doesn't really need Ser Jorah and Sir Barristan both at her side.
Well, for sure. And I mean, like, if you think about the conversation, just to pivot over to the Jorah and Tyrion stuff from tonight, if you think back on what they were talking about and how Tyrion's saying, like, look, you think that bringing me to Daenerys is going to get me executed and you pardoned. I think that the reverse could be just as likely. I think that you could still be in big trouble for showing your face again, and I might be the guy who looks pretty good. So in light of Barristan being gone, you kind of have to scratch your head and wonder, like, maybe what Tyrion said had some truth to it, but, like, maybe Dany's really going to need a Jorah Mormont, if, and it's still an if Jorah and Tyrion make it to Meereen. Like, is Dany really going to be itching for somebody to kind of fill that Barristan the Bold Jorah Mormont spot? And if she has actual Jorah Mormont, she might reconsider her position from last season.
Yeah, the problem is that Dario kind of also has the same job as Ser Jorah, as being like the love interest of Dany, and Dario has sort of filled that role pretty amply, and
among other roles.
Yeah.
So
that's really the problem. Like Ser Jorah and Sir Barristan doing the same thing, not that big of a conflict. It's more the Dario and Ser Jorah that conflict that's the bigger problem.
Yeah, well, first let's get Jorah to Meereen before we really dive too deep into this, because they're far away. They've got some distance to cover if they're going to get there in one piece. But
how far is Pentos to Meereen? I haven't gotten out my map of the East recently.
Well, so they're coming from Volantis. They had to go to Volantis from Pentos, and now from Volantis they're going to Meereen. I don't have the map out in front of me, but it's not short. It's not a short distance. It's going to be a little bit of a trip if they're going to make it there.
Okay, so Dany is going to have her hands full. Sir Barristan is gone. Grey Worm is certainly, at best, life support.
Yeah, not doing great. At best, having a terrible day. Having a really not great day. But man, what a badass! He was the best Unsullied out there for sure.
Yeah. and still talk about the fighting pits and whatnot. Maybe let's open up the fighting pits. Maybe the Sons of the Harpies could go do their stuff in the fighting pits and leave everybody else alone.
But is that the move right now? Is that the right move? Is it, we're going to give into these terrorist demands at this point? We're going to open the fighting pits, after these people keep flooding the streets and killing everybody. Like we're gonna give in to them at this point.
Is that the terrorist demands of open the fighting pits?
I think that once you give them the fighting pits, then who knows what they're demanding next? This is why you don't negotiate with terrorists, Rob, which I know is not always been Post-Show Recap's policy, but...
Yeah, but I kind of feel if we had like a fundamentalist like angry group, and they were saying like we want we want an Ultimate Fighting League, I feel like okay.
Give them UFC.
Yeah. At least they have something to think about instead of organizing like all of these attacks on the civilization.
Man, it's really a shame that Khal Drogo is gone. He'd be great at Game of Thrones UFC.
I think so.
He'd be great.
All right. Anything else from Danny and Sir Barristan other than our shock at this point?
I mean, it's stuff that we can. I don't know if we want to talk about it now or if we want to talk about it when we talk about the scene in Winterfell between Sansa and Littlefinger. But there's some talk of Dany's late brother Rhaegar Targaryen in both of those storylines. I think is pretty interesting.
A lot of Rhaegar talk. Rhaegar really being put out in front in our faces in this episode.
Yeah, they're waving the Rhaegar flag in front of us, which is interesting stuff. And you get like two very different perspectives on Rhaegar. You get a fairly negative edit for Rhaegar in the Winterfell story, but the picture that Barristan paints of Rhaegar here is super positive. He's talking about Rhaegar as a guy who would leave the Red Keep and hang out with the people on the streets and sing for them, and he would donate his profits to the other minstrels or an orphanage, or he's a big supporter of the arts, obviously, and the disenfranchised. Barristan says something to the effect of he didn't like killing, but he really loved singing.
Yeah.
So he would have been a good contender for like Westeros Idol. He would have done really well.
Well, yeah, there's like two sides of this story about Lyanna and what really happened. Of course, we heard the Stark side of that, Rhaegar, kidnapped and raped her, but we hear from the Sir Barristan, Rhaegar Targaryen is kind of like the Justin Timberlake of Westeros.
Yeah.
Did he win over Lyanna with his song and his crown of flowers?
Right.
Did they go run away together?
Right. Well, I think that it's really cool that this is being brought up on the show, because this kind of backstory doesn't really tend to land on Game of Thrones all too often. These are the kinds of stories that you read about a lot in the books, and they don't always pop up. The past isn't quite as important on the show as it is in the books, but we're talking about, for people who maybe don't remember, the whole reason why the Targaryens are no longer in power in Westeros is because allegedly, this guy Rhaegar Targaryen, who's the Mad King's son, he supposedly runs off, kidnaps Ned Stark's sister, who is betrothed to Robert Baratheon, and it kickstarts this big rebellion, Robert's Rebellion, that ends up with Robert Baratheon on the throne, and Lyanna Stark is dead, and Rhaegar Targaryen is dead. And in the history books with the Robert Baratheon regime, Rhaegar Targaryen is not going to sound so great. He's going to sound like a bit of a punk. He's going to sound like he meddled with things, and he created this mess that got the Baratheons in power, and that's a pretty bad narrative. But then you hear this from Barristan, who is a guy that we, rest in peace, he's a guy that we trusted. He's a guy whose opinion seemed to have a lot of honor to it, and he's talking about Rhaegar as a very different guy. And this was, Barristan was a big fan of, the Targaryens. He served a lot of Targaryen kings, so he's not without his bias, but this is a very different picture of a character who kind of in Westeros, from the people that we know, have really demonized this guy. So it's interesting to think about, for sure. It's a very different perspective on a character that has up until now been kind of looked at as a problem figure.
Yeah, and I wonder if there's going to be more and more Rhaegar talk during this season of Game of Thrones.
Yeah, well, I mean, it was great when Barristan was alive and could tell Dany all about her brother, but now that he's gone, who's really going to be singing those songs? So I think, if we're going to hear about Rhaegar more this season, who's really going to be talking about him from, the positive perspective that Barristan was talking about him? probably not too many people that I can think of off the top of my head, but if Littlefinger can kind of speak about Rhaegar the way that he was, which wasn't super flattering, and Sansa knows Rhaegar from the stories, those are probably more of the stories we would be hearing about Rhaegar. But I wonder if it's going to keep coming up. He's a really interesting character. He's one of those. He's a fan favorite character in the Thrones community. People who've read these books and are invested in this story, they really like Rhaegar Targaryen. He's an interesting guy.
Okay. There's a lot to cover tonight, so let's go to King's Landing.
Let's do it. Let's go.
And Josh, I'm really confused about what is going on, but maybe what else is new about, Cersei is sort of gearing up. We saw her with the High Sparrow last week, and she is gearing up this new group, which is called the Faith Militant.
The Faith Militant, yeah.
And so she is arming a group, which are sort of this other radical group, which is all about, the really literal interpretation of everything going on with the Seven, and they're pulling people out of brothels, and she's basically created an army for the church.
Right.
My question to you, Josh, is why? Is this all just to take Marjorie's brother and arrest him? This seems like a long way to go just for that, just to take Sir Loras out.
Well, I think that she's becoming buddies with the High Sparrow. She's putting the High Sparrow in a position of serious power. She's giving this guy, she's putting swords in this guy's hands and in the hands of everybody that he hand selects, including Lancel. Lancel's one of these guys now. And I think that, Cersei is... her back is getting closer and closer to the wall. She is, threatened last week with the prospect of being sent away to Casterly Rock. Her son, the king, is married now. There's a new queen in town. This marriage has lasted longer than a couple of hours. It's still going, so knock on wood. But Tommen and Marjorie seems to be a thing that's working out. He seems infatuated with her. She is more and more getting Tommen's ear, and Cersei is obviously not thrilled about that, not a big Marjorie fan. So to say that this is just something that she is doing to get Loras sent into jail, I think is simplifying it. I think it's certainly a power move against the Tyrells. Easy to forget that she basically sends Mace Tyrell off to go to Braavos. She gets...
or worse, that the fact that
right.
She sends
Meryn Trant.
Meryn Trant. That's one of her hitmen.
Yeah, it's one of her go-to guys.
I'm worried. I don't think that Mace Tyrell's coming back, Josh.
And he seems like a bit of an idiot, right? Like he just seems like he's fairly clueless, and if his life was in danger, he doesn't seem like he has like spidey sense for that.
No.
He seems like if Meryn Trant was like, hey, come down this dark alley, Mace Tyrell would be like, oh, cool, let's go down there. That sounds like a lovely plan.
Yeah, because especially like his report was like, well, Iron Bank, they want 1/10 of their money back, and really, the crown can't cover it, but I guess we could float a loan to you guys. I guess I'd have to get my daughter to pay us back.
Right, but we could do it.
Like, well, on top of that, that's nice, but I think you need to go off in person so I could kill you.
Right. It's like, oh, that sounds like a decent plan, actually.
Yeah.
But yeah, so she, that's a power move. She sends Mace Tyrell off to go to Braavos or worse, as you point out. Very, very fair observation. And so he's gone while this is going on, and now she has, she's got, her plausible deniability. She's saying like, oh, I didn't have Loras arrested, but she put the word in the High Sparrow's ear for sure, at the very least. But I think that saying that this is just her way of getting, Loras Tyrell arrested, I think is simplifying things. I think it's a move against the Tyrells. I think it's a move to exert her own power. She has put this radical force into place, on her own steam. She's the one who goes to Tommen and says, let's do this. This seems like a great idea. High Sparrow is now deputized. The Faith Militant is brought back after 2 centuries of being on ice. And it's all Cersei's flexing. She's flexing. She's the one who is putting this into motion. And I think for somebody who has been pretty powerless recently, for her, this seems like a pretty powerful move. And if she's aligned with the High Sparrow the way that she thinks she is, could be a very, very scary thing for someone like Marjorie.
But I just don't get it. Why is Cersei doing this? We know that she's so calculated. I mean, if the people that follow the High Sparrow, if the Faith Militant, are so upset that with, Sir Loras for what he's doing, how will they react about, and we heard people like calling out to Tommen about how he's the product of incest.
Right.
Is incest not as bad of a sin as some of these other things that the High Sparrow and his crew are going and killing people over?
Right. You wouldn't think they'd like it, right? You wouldn't think that if they really heard those rumors loud and clear, and if they looked into them enough and believed them to be true. And look, Ned Stark, a guy without interns, was able to unearth this thing by just looking around in a few books. You would think that maybe if the Faith Militant are poking around into that theory, they're going to find something as well. You don't think that would go well. These don't seem to be the type of people that would be really into the incest thing. And you do see it. I mean, you see these people who are at the steps, who are shouting at Tommen Bastard and Abomination and things like that. You're not really hearing it too much, I don't think, from the Faith Militant themselves. Regardless of that, though, the Faith Militant stand in the way of the king of the seven realms, of the seven kingdoms. The man on the Iron Throne. They stand in between him and a meeting with the High Sparrow because the High Sparrow is praying. How about that as a power move? These are true I don't give an F sort of attitude coming from the Faith Militant towards the king. So maybe that in itself is a sign that Cersei, thinking that she's got this power over this group of people, maybe she doesn't have quite as much power as she thinks.
I don't know. It just seems like such a miscalculation to me of why she's doing it. It seems very short-sighted.
She has been day drinking quite a bit. She has been, she's been hitting that red wine pretty hard. For Cersei Lannister, to have a half-baked plan would not be out of character. There's this great line that she, and this great scene that she has with Tyrion Lannister earlier in the series, where she says to him, like, you're not half as clever as you think you are. And he spits back at her, saying, that still makes me twice as clever as you. It's a zinger. It's a zinger. And he's, there's something to that. Is Cersei's arc in a big way has been like, Tywin Lannister, this accomplished guy, this, really the true ruler of the realm. He is, got all of these honors. He's got all of this respect. He has this huge resume. His two sons, one of them is known as like the most badass knight in Westeros. One of them, even if he's not loved by the people or even by his own family, is undeniably brilliant. And then there's Cersei, who is talked about as like the most beautiful person in Westeros, but she thinks of herself as much more. She thinks of herself as being as politically cunning as Tywin, as smart as Tyrion, as fierce in a fight in her own way as Jaime, and that's really been her chip on her shoulder. Now's kind of her time to put her money where her mouth is, and now is kind of the time where we have to ask, like, is she capable of all this stuff that she thinks she's capable of, or does she have a really high opinion of herself, and it probably shouldn't be so high? You've poked a few holes into her plan right now, Rob. I think that she probably hasn't thought a lot of that stuff through yet.
Okay, Josh, do you feel like come tomorrow morning we're going to read a lot of articles online that there's going to be some backlash over the Game of Thrones universe being suddenly intolerant of Sir Loras being gay?
I don't think so. I think in terms of a backlash,
yes.
I don't think so. I think it's unfortunately, I think it's in keeping with what we've seen on the show so far. Loras has been laughed at behind his back, and he's been the object of a lot of ridicule among the characters on the show for this stuff. And I think that we're talking about a group of characters now who've just been empowered in a really dangerous way, who very fiercely reject all forms of sin, however major or minor, are going to punish you accordingly. And, I mean, unfortunately, there are, very, very devout people who interpret things certain ways that have these very strong feelings towards, people of Loras's persuasion. it's something that's unfortunately really all too real in a lot of cases. And I think that it's true to life and just as importantly true to Game of Thrones. I don't think it's out of character for the show. So I don't expect to see a lot of that in terms of backlash. I do expect to see a lot of conversation about it, and I hope to see a lot of conversation about it, but I don't think it's the show acting unfairly. I think the show, in terms of how it's speaking about actual conversation in our world, but also being true to its own universe, I think it's fairly spot on right now. It's unfortunate, but it's spot on.
Okay. I know that we could probably continue to go on and on about the Faith Militant, but do you want to go to the wall?
Sure, let's go to the wall.
Okay.
Man, the wall was a doozy this week.
Boy,
There's a big melodrama going on.
Yes, a lot of stuff going on there with melodrama. A lot of stuff going on with Stannis and Stannis. I wasn't expecting the Stannis is a good dad storyline to show up tonight.
Yeah, that was great. That was really great. This is a world with such bad parents.
Winter edit for Stannis?
Maybe winter edit for Stannis. Listen, talk about winter edit for Stannis. The fact that Littlefinger threw his support behind Stannis tonight, things are looking up for Stannis. I don't know. He certainly is walking away as one of the better parents on Game of Thrones. We've had some really terrible moms and dads on this show. Shireen's mom is not much better, frankly. She's got a lot of cruel things to say about her daughter. But here's Stannis, giving her this big hug, basically taking responsibility for her getting grayscale in the first place. Him saying you spending the rest of your days with the Stone Men was no place for a Baratheon. He was great. His daddy's little girl was a really nice moment. I liked it a lot.
It was a very nice moment.
Good.
So good for Stannis, but meanwhile, that as that's going on, the Red Woman, Melisandre, is having her own meeting with Jon Snow.
Yeah, a rendezvous.
Yeah. And so
dangerous liaisons going on in there.
Yes, absolutely. And so after Jon, signs the order to accept the men from Roose Bolton, and we do find out that Jon Snow does indeed know what happened with the Boltons.
Yeah, he is aware. He is
aware of that. So here comes Melisandre, and she is, saying, put your hand on my heart, and she's naked.
And by heart, I mean my boob.
Yeah. And so here she is, and she's trying to seduce Lord Snow.
Yeah, Lord Commander Snow.
Lord Commander Snow.
Call him by his full title.
His full title.
Yeah, this was. I mean, listen, she asked him about the V card a couple of weeks ago, and now she's making moves. Yeah, and Jon is, really quick to point out, before he even gets into the whole vows thing and the whole I love somebody else thing, he is like, "Is sure Stannis is cool with this?"
Yeah. He's like, he doesn't need to know.
I don't think Stannis is going to be into this. But yeah, Melisandre definitely has the hots for Jon. It certainly seems.
Yeah, and she did have the thing with Gendry, and she did, that was Robert's bastard, and now here she is with another one of these bastards. So right. She does seem to have a thing for this. But she says to Jon, "There's power in you. Two parts are a greater whole," and she says that there's something going on here between them.
Yeah, we got a thing. Don't you feel it? Do you feel the heat? Yeah, they would be a very beautiful whole, the two of them.
Whoa!
Together. I mean, look, it's true. Apply the woes all you want. I think it's true.
Okay.
It'd be a very good-looking woe, but I think. Are we going to see that? I mean, Jon seemed to put his foot down pretty hard on this. It's if he's hard to imagine how he is going to get to what Melisandre maybe wants out of him after he's rejected her in this scenario.
Right.
It kind of feels like Jon's, he's made his call on this one.
Seems like an open and shut case. Jon Snow says, I have a vow, and I loved another. I still love her. But here's where I think things get interesting, Josh. Melisandre says to Jon, "You know nothing, Jon Snow."
Yeah.
That's Ygritte's catchphrase.
Yeah. And she grins, too, afterwards. Like, she smiles at him as though, it feels to me like she's smiling at him like she knows something. Like
She
she knows that
knows.
she's not just like dropping, these words together as if it's, just like an arbitrary thing that she's throwing out. Like she's the first person who has ever said this to him. It seems like she knows what she's saying and that this is going to be
She
emotionally
knows
resonant.
something.
Yeah, she knows something, Jon Snow. But yeah, no, that was crazy. That was crazy for her to bust that line out. What did you think of that, Rob?
Well, is Melisandre? We've certainly seen demonstrations of her power before in the past. Can she communicate with the dead? Is that one of her powers? Is she in communication with Ygritte?
Is
Is it like Ghost, where it's like John could have sex with her, and it's like she's having sex? Is like he's having sex with Ygritte, like when Whoopi Goldberg was kissing Demi Moore in Ghost?
Yeah, Unchained Melody style?
Yes. Does she have a penny that she wants to give to Jon Snow?
Oh my God! And is it going to turn out that the president from Scandal is responsible for all of this?
Yes.
Oh my
Yes.
God,
Yes.
that sounds like a plot twist. That sounds like a pretty good plot twist. I don't
Oh
know.
my
I mean,
God.
is she Whoopi Goldberg-ish? Is she able to channel the dead? Are we going to get a pottery scene? I don't know about that. I mean, I think that even if it's not that she can communicate with, the dead or anything like that, she certainly has demonstrated that she sees things in the fires and she has visions of stuff and great intuition. So I think that, even if we're not revealing a new power of hers, it's in keeping with what we have seen from her. She's been able to divine some key information out of situations before. So I don't know. It was very cool though. Really really great scene. Just a great button to that already pretty hot scene.
But to me, that was a little bit of a game changer because I feel like in this world, we've had a lot of times where, okay, well, this character died, so that information dies with them. And I guess we'll never know because now this character died. But if we're showing that there is communication that is going on between dead characters and the living through Melisandre, doesn't that feel like a game changer?
Yeah, for sure. For
Okay.
sure. I mean, how could I elaborate on that any further? I mean, if that is what's going on, there's certainly a ton of dead people on this show. This show, there's like probably more dead people than like dead people we care about than alive people we care about at this point. There's a ton of bodies in the wake of the past 4 going on 5 full seasons of Game of Thrones, and a lot of them know very, very, very interesting stuff. Even like, so let's just like take it for John, for example. He could have a conversation with Ygritte through Melisandre. That's great. He could find out some other important stuff. The last time he hung out with his dad, with Ned Stark, Ned said to him, "The next time I see you, I'll tell you all about your mom." That never really happened because Ned got his head chopped off. But if suddenly he can start communicating with dead Ned, he'd be able to find out more about his mom and all of this stuff and where he came from, things like that. So there's a lot of potential with something like that. Whether or not that's where we're going, who's to say? But it's certainly that would be a game changer. Yeah, there's no way of saying that enough. If that is the case, that's absolutely a game changer.
Okay. Let's talk about all things Dornish, and let's talk about Jaime and Bronn.
Great team up. Love these guys.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Yeah. Would you watch a Jaime and Bronn movie?
Yeah, they're like the Miles and Sawyer of Game of Thrones at this point. Like the Miles and
Miles
Sawyer.
and Sawyer. Wow.
Yeah, they're like the Miles and Sawyer cop show. Like that's how badly I want like the Jaime and Bronn spinoff. Like that would be so great. It would be so good. This is a really great character combo for sure.
Okay, yeah, it's very fun. So they end up coming up with this plan to go to Dorne. A little bit different than what we anticipated. We thought it was going to be more of like a broad trip, but it was more of a boat trip.
Boat trip?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, there was a lot of travel by sea. Yeah, not really riding on horses down to Dorne. But I mean, we got maybe we yada their way to Dorne, but as soon as we landed in Dorne, it got very real, very fast.
Because of the snake?
Because of the snake, that was terrifying. Why did it have to be snakes?
Yeah. Josh, could you just talk me through what exactly happened with the captain of the boat? So he betrayed them and then went to the sand snakes, and they did the thing where they buried him up to his head, and then let scorpions walk on his face.
That's such a devious trick.
Yeah.
That's such a terrible thing to do. Well, what one of them says, what one of the Sand Snakes says, and forgive me, I don't know all of their names off the top of my head, but one of them says something to the effect of, this guy, this Pentoshi captain was walking around and saying like, I got some good information, I've got stuff to sell you, and they caught wind of it. And he's, going around being able to say that Jaime Lannister is in Dorne. The Sand Snake contingent, led by Ilaria Sand, who's the Red Viper's late lady friend, she wants revenge on the Lannisters for what happened to the Red Viper and Elia Martell and all of this stuff. She's got the Red Viper's fighting spirit in her. She wants to go to war. The Red Viper's brother seems to not want to go to war. He seems to want peace. He seems to want to just mourn his brother and keep things calm. If he finds out that Jaime Lannister is in Dorne, what he's going to do with Jaime Lannister is going to be very different from what the Sand Snakes would do with Jaime Lannister. So it behooves the Sand Snakes to capture this guy who can be running around saying Jaime Lannister is here, Jaime Lannister is here, and do with him what they will, rather than letting that information go to Prince Doran Martell.
Yeah. I just feel like the Lannister bloodlust is a little misguided. I know they're hot-blooded people.
They're the worst.
Yeah, but I mean, the Red Viper was fighting for one of the Lannisters.
Well, that's because Tyrion's the best. Tyrion's the exception to the rule. And look, if they got to know Jaime, if they sat down with him, maybe they'd see the whole doing his sister thing wasn't so weird, and he's a pretty nice guy. He's a pretty guy. He's still good as a lefty. There's a lot to like about Jaime Lannister.
People want their pound of flesh and everything like that.
They don't know Jaime. They know the name. They know the Lannister name, and the Lannister name in Dorne, it does not go along way in terms of gaining any favors. As Bronn says, there's this conversation before the 4 Dornish soldiers come upon them. Bronn is saying like, dude, I don't think you realize how much people hate your family here. And it's not without reason. The Lannisters, they sacked King's Landing when the Mad King was in power, and if you believe the rumors, and I think that what we know about the show and what we've seen from the characters who were supposedly involved, like the Mountain, I think we believe them. And the Mountain even confessed to it during his big fight with the Red Viper. Like, yeah, I raped your sister. I killed your niece. I crushed her head just like this, and he popped the Red Viper's head like that. This is all on the orders. He's taking some creative license probably, but it's on the orders of the Lannisters. The Lannisters backed all of this happening, and their sacking of King's Landing leads to the Martells losing some very important people in their family. So the Dornish, they don't like the Lannisters. And as much as we might like Jaime Lannister these days, you can't blame him. You can't blame him for not being thrilled that a Lannister is on shore, especially unannounced.
Okay. Just real quick on the Jaime and Tyrion stuff. We find out tonight that Jaime says if he ever sees his brother again, he's going to split him in 2.
Right, yeah, he did say that.
Wow. Wow, okay. That's very upsetting. Upsetting to hear.
He's very upset. Jaime's obviously going through, some mood swings of his own, now that his father is dead, who he didn't have the best relationship with to begin with. But the fact that he's dead because Jaime played a big role in, rescuing his brother, saving his brother, who he loves very much. And his brother turns around and repays the kindness by killing their father and causing all sorts of pandemonium throughout King's Landing and throughout Westeros. I'd be pissed too. If my brother did that, I love my brother, but I'd want to tear him in half as well. Would I actually mean it when I say that like I would cut him in half? Probably not, because I don't have the physical power to do such a thing, and I don't think I have that much bloodlust in my heart, but you never know when push comes to shove. But this could just be Jaime, talking heat. This could be him being really, red hot angry and talking like that, or maybe he means it. And if he means it, Tyrion, maybe stay where you are. Stay with Ser Jorah. At least don't come back without someone strong to your family reunion with the Lannisters.
Yeah, Jaime has gone Inigo Montoya on Tyrion.
Yeah, and but unlike Inigo Montoya, he is left-handed.
Yes. And he is dealing with only 5 fingers and not trying to track down an 11-fingered person.
Oh yeah, he would love that 6-finger. Like if he was the 6-fingered man, it would be a step up for him from where he is. Although the fake hand came in handy tonight, that was pretty cool.
Yeah, was that a pun? That it came in handy?
It came in handy. It did.
Yes,
it did.
was.
That was great.
What do you think of the action sequences? I was on the edge of my chair.
In Dorne or just
Yeah,
throughout
in
the
Dorne. In
episode? I
Dorne.
mean, it was a crazy episode for action. You know, one of the more action-packed episodes of Thrones that I can remember. But the Dorne one was really great. It was very intense to see Jaime in battle for the first time. Really, you know, not kind of the bear pit, and I guess we should count the bear pit. That was something. But you know, his first sword fight that wasn't training with Bronn. His first sword fight for his life against somebody who, if he lost, was going to, you know, kill him. You know, Jaime was fighting for his life here, left-handed for the first time, and he wasn't fantastic. He wasn't great. This is supposed to be the greatest swordsman in Westeros, and he's, you know, I'm not saying that I would stand a chance against left-handed Jaime Lannister, but he's not who he was. So the stakes were really high, and you know, seeing him kind of afraid and panicked, and his back against, you know, the steep drop off of that hill. It was intense. It was really intense. Definitely edge of your seat stuff.
It was great. And so we also got to see the sand snakes for the first time. You touched on them. What was your take on seeing the sand snakes in practice?
Look, it was really sad for the Red Viper to go out the way that he did. You know, given that he had all of these things to accomplish, he had all of this vengeance in his heart. He doesn't get to satisfy it. He dies in such a gruesome way. You know, to the point that I don't know if we can ever really match that in terms of just like sheer popping nastiness. It was disgusting. And he was also just a terrific character. You know, Pedro Pascal was such a great presence on the show as the Red Viper. That being said, if we lose him and in his place we like gain these like his 3 badass bastard daughters, one of whom we at least have already seen in action is able to just like chuck a spear through your face, no problem whatsoever. I don't know if I want to say it's, you know, a worthy trade-off necessarily, because I still love that Red Viper, but it's a cool addition of 3 characters that hopefully will live up to their father in terms of just the sheer awesomeness that he brought to this show. So I really liked their introduction. I think that whatever's brewing with these characters could be very, very cool on the show.
Okay. Yeah, it definitely was interesting. What was going on with the scorpions on the guy's head? Where they were wanting the scorpions to?
And it's just like torture. It's just them being horrible. You know, I think that they like this stuff. You know, the Martells, especially, you know, anybody. Well, I guess they're not true Martells, but anyone who comes from Oberyn Martell's stock probably delights in this kind of thing. You know, it kind of gets their jollies off.
Better or worse, here tonight, well, the second week in a row, we'll do a Game of Thrones Sons of Anarchy thing. The scorpions on your head, like in Game of Thrones, or on Sons of Anarchy when Clay and I don't even remember who he was with, when they went to the reservation and those guys had somebody buried in the ground and then had ants all over the guy's face.
Neither of them are great.
Which would you rather have?
I mean, I guess it's like kind of like the which would you rather fight, like one horse-sized duck or like 10 duck-sized horses or whatever that, you know, eternal. Have you heard that one before?
Yeah.
What would you pick in that one, by the way?
The
big duck or like the army of small?
I think it'd be easier to get away from the big duck.
Small horses. Yeah, I think it's like the same conundrum here. I haven't figured it out yet. I haven't come to. I've been battling with this philosophical question for years now, Rob. I don't have an answer for you tonight.
Yeah, I think I'd rather be in the position on Game of Thrones because I feel like, you know, there's like 2 or 3 scorpions that like they might all just walk away. Like 1,000 ants aren't gonna go away. They're fire ants too.
Right. Oh, fire ants are horrible. One time when I was a kid, I was very upset with my family when we were on vacation. I went away and I cried into a bush, and I emerged from the bush covered in fire ants.
Oh my God! Now you had something to cry about.
It was very embarrassing and painful on many levels.
Oh my God! All right.
It's horrible.
Let's talk about Sansa in the crypt. We touched on the Lyanna talk, but some news tonight concerning what Littlefinger's plans are at this point.
Going back to King's Landing.
Boy. I'm bummed out to hear that because I feel like it's going to take Littlefinger the rest of the season to get from Winterfell to King's Landing.
Well, you would think that, but then you'd be forgetting that it took like Catelyn Stark 2 minutes to get from Winterfell to King's Landing in that first season.
I hope so.
You know, when you think about it like that, like people actually could travel a lot faster than they actually do on this show. That's actually frustrating if you think about it for too long. But maybe Littlefinger will use whatever magical, you know, super fast ship that Catelyn used to get to King's Landing as quickly as she did. Who knows?
Also, if he goes by boat, it won't be as bad.
If he goes by boat, it won't be as bad. If he goes by horsey, Especially if he goes by an army of duck-sized horses, it'll take him a little while.
All right. So as far as Littlefinger goes, the Queen is summoning Littlefinger. What does she want to know from Littlefinger?
I don't know. I mean, we've been wondering this since last week. Roose Bolton. Yeah, Roose Bolton intercepts that letter that's meant for Littlefinger, and we, the viewer, still don't know what was in there. But it was enough that Roose wants to read the reply, and obviously it's enough that Cersei wants Littlefinger in King's Landing for something. What she has up her sleeve, I have no idea. And Littlefinger, whether or not he has an idea, you have to imagine that he does, because he's made such a risky play here with Sansa just now. That would he just walk back into King's Landing if he thought that he was at risk for getting busted on that? I tend to think no, but who knows? Maybe I'm overestimating Littlefinger. I don't know. Who knows? Who knows? She obviously wants something. It was whatever her reasons are were probably alluded to in this letter that we haven't read, and Littlefinger is not telling us why. Something that's going to play out over the coming episodes for sure.
Hey, well, Stannis kind of laid out his game plan here, is that, Sansa is going to marry Ramsay Snow, but Stannis is up at the wall. Littlefinger knows this. He's going to come down here. He's going to, take out the Boltons. He's going to liberate Winterfell. Sansa is going to be Wardeness of the North?
Wardeness.
Wardeness of the North. And then ultimately she's going to be, free to do whatever she wants. Key line here, I thought, was Littlefinger says, even the most dangerous men can be outmaneuvered. Is that sort of a meta thing where are we supposed to get the takeaway that Littlefinger is the dangerous man that can be outmaneuvered?
I would read it that way as well. That was definitely on my mind. He is the guy who's attempting to outmaneuver everybody right now. He is a very dangerous man, in terms of what he has put into play, who he's responsible for killing, who he's betrayed. He's absolutely a dangerous man who loves to outmaneuver people. So if he's saying even the most dangerous men can be outmaneuvered, and he's not realizing that he's talking about himself, then he's sorely mistaken. As for whether or not that's where we're going, who knows? But I think that the show definitely wants us to. I think that the show, whether it's the show or the viewers, I feel like we're kind of with Littlefinger, with a character like that. I feel like we're always on the line of like, do we want Littlefinger to pull this off, or do we want him to get a slice of humble pie? I think that this line is a line that is in favor of the people that want him to feast on some humble pie, who want to see Littlefinger trip up and fall. I think that this was a point in their favor.
And we're going to have Littlefinger now headed back, but before he leaves, he plants another one on Sansa.
Gross.
It is pretty gross. But
what's
gross.
It's pretty gross.
I mean, what is going? Is this a romance?
For Littlefinger, for sure, I think, right? You would think that he's feeling this pretty hard.
Who would Sansa rather make out with, Littlefinger or Ramsay Snow?
Neither. Neither of them. Preferably neither of them, but at least Ramsay Snow is her age.
Does Sansa ever get to make out with somebody that she wants to make out with?
I don't recall seeing.
Can we run down the list of Sansa's kisses?
Yeah, it's basically. I mean, I don't know how much she made out with Joffrey, but before he killed her dad, they did kiss once. That was probably good.
Okay,
that was probably
Joffrey.
That was probably her favorite kiss on Game of Thrones.
All right, let's add to the list. How about the Hound?
That wasn't great. That wasn't fun. I don't think she liked that.
All right, how about Tyrion?
Probably liked it more than the Hound.
Can I ask a question? What is going on with Tyrion and Sansa's marriage? Does that get disavowed when Tyrion gets guilty of the murder of Joffrey?
Spectacular question. I have no answer for you. I have no idea. I have no clue. I have no idea what that means in terms of the legality in the
is there
laws
divorce
of gods
in
of
the
men
Seven
here.
Kingdoms? Like, I know there's a lot of she's a widow, but can you get divorced?
Yeah, I don't know. I'll ask Antonio Mazzaro on the feedback show. These are great questions for Antonio for the feedback show. You guys should send in your voicemails about all of this stuff.
Yeah. Does the High Septon have to annul the marriage? Is there a? I
don't think you want the High Sparrow annulling this marriage. I think that would be bad.
I don't know. I mean, she's legally still married to Tyrion. I don't know what exactly the call is there.
Yeah.
What if they get a verdict from the Home Office? Okay. All right, and then the only other story we didn't talk about, and it's the same story that we ended the show on last week and started the podcast last week, was Tyrion and Jorah.
Right. Yeah. We touched on it super briefly when we were talking about Murine, but just to kind of talk about it a little bit further, I think we get some clarity on is Varys going to tag along with these guys? I think the answer is no, unless he's like doing really well at like being like 7 ships back. But as of now, or if he has like a tracker on Tyrion, I don't think so.
Do you think we're done with Varys in season 5?
I can't imagine we're done with Varys. Can you like? Is that just how we're just
I'll
gonna
be
leave?
so mad. I'll be so mad.
People love Varys. Like, if you're gonna get Varys off the show, you got to do it conclusively and awesomely. Like, you can't just leave him in a brothel. That's such torture. So I would expect that we will see Varys again, but the question is how and when, and how soon, and all of that stuff. But he's not with not Jamie. He's not with Tyrion and Jorah certainly right now. So we were wondering about that last week. Is Varys going to tag along for that? He's not. As of right now, we get a little bit of a sense of like what the dynamic between Jorah and Tyrion is going to be. Not very friendly. Jorah is not great for conversation, which is a bummer because Tyrion is great at conversation.
Yeah, I feel like Tyrion handled this poorly. I feel like he was a little a little aggressive, a little confrontational.
Well, Tyrion's off his game for many reasons. He was in a box for a long time, and then he was in a bigger box for a while. Probably still feeling some motion sickness. He's probably got some, he's probably getting some shakes from not having any red wine recently. And also there's the not insignificant fact that he murdered his lover and his father in the same night, and that wasn't so long ago. So Tyrion is in a rough patch. Tyrion's in a rough patch. So if he's not thinking with his A game, you can't totally blame him for it.
Okay.
But it was pretty awesome that he was able to figure out that this was Jorah Mormont just on like a few visual cues. That's pretty sweet.
Yeah. Good job by Tyrion. He's not that far off his game. All right, let's take in some questions. Let's bring in questions from the viewers and the listeners of the podcast. And let's start off with Jason Birding, who says, Meryn Trant in Bravos, Arya in Bravos. Are we going to see a name checked off her list this season?
Oh, yeah, it's awesome. Yeah, I mean, Meryn Trant is like one of the 4 names that's still on Arya's list of people to kill. Her to kill list. Meryn Trant is still on there. And if going to Bravos isn't, what's the Breaking Bad? Going to Belize, right? If going to Bravos isn't just a euphemism like going to Belize, and if he's literally going to Bravos with Mace Tyrell, that could be very bad news for, honestly, either one of them, Arya or Mance or Meryn Trant. They're both pretty qualified soldiers and killers and fighters, but you would root for Arya for sure. I mean, hopefully if he's going to Bravos, we're going to see something there. That'd be cool.
No Arya tonight. Were you bummed?
No Arya tonight. Was I bummed? No, just because we've gotten a decent amount of her in the last couple of episodes, so I can, I'll survive. It's okay. There's lots of really cool stuff going on tonight that I was pretty entertained.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let me take this one because that it is long and I have the full copy of it here.
Let's get it.
All right. Throughout the season, this is from Justin Sharkey. Throughout the season, we have seen Margaery playing a really solid game. However, the news of her brother threw her off and caused her to bring up her and Cersei's relationships to Tommen, and then she had to backtrack. Is this a sign that Margaery may not have what it takes to win against Cersei?
Interesting. It certainly shows that Margaery isn't just like the political Terminator that maybe we were, saying she is. We rarely see Margaery in a moment of weakness, but we saw her in a big moment of weakness tonight. Whether or not that means she doesn't have what it takes to take on Cersei, I don't know. I mean, whose track record do you like better? Margaery, who's expressing a moment of weakness tonight because her brother has been arrested, and understandably you're going to be very upset about something like that. Or Cersei, who has been rattled on numerous occasions in the past. So, it's a for my money, I think it's like an understandable look for Margaery to be very upset, and I wouldn't say that this, rules me out on Margaery's political savvy. I think that she's still been pretty good. So her versus Cersei, I think, is still at the very worst a fair fight.
I did like when Margaery said, "Oh, I have to go talk to my grandmother. Please, more Queen of Thorns."
Yeah, let's get true. Let's say hi, Grandma. Let's get her back on the show for sure.
Hi, Grandma.
Hi, Grandma.
All right.
This is from Renegade Music. So did Grey Worm die too? And if so, is this the end of Phase 2 of the Dany Small Council and the beginning of Phase 3 with Tyrion, Ser Jorah, and Varys? And I'm going to take these Phase 2 and Phase 3 things as Easter eggs for the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And if you're a fan of the Marvel movies, you should listen to the Avengers podcast we just did on post-show recaps.
Yeah, Josh Wigler has got the Avengers Age of Ultron covered on post-show recaps. It's a full. You totally reviewed and recapped the movie, right?
That's a thing that happened. We promised it last week. We did it this weekend. 2 hours of Age of Ultron nerdery. Very nerdy podcast. So if you like the nerd stuff, you'll be very happy.
Well, that's fantastic that you did that. I know. That's awesome. The movie comes out Friday. Boom, podcast.
Yeah, it's out. It's
Post-show
there.
recaps.
Go listen to it. That's enough plugging. Let's talk about this though. Let's talk about Danny's small council. Is this the end of Phase 2? Is this the end of the Barristan and Grey Worm era, and we're shaping up for Phase 3? Getting Tyrion, getting Varys if Varys is still on his way to Meereen. Getting Jorah back in the mix. Are we looking to set up the new configuration of Danny's small council?
Sure. I mean, it definitely feels like the Danny administration is bombing right now. Everything is going wrong. We need some new blood in there. So whether is it Ser Jorah, something old, something new, something borrowed. I don't know what that would be. Is there one of the dragons blue?
I think one of them's blue.
Dario's supposed to be blue, right?
Dario Naharis?
Yeah.
Yeah, he's supposed to have blue hair.
Yeah. Okay. So there you go. That's the new small council.
Yeah. A lot of people don't like that Dario doesn't have blue hair on the show.
Yeah.
That's a nitpick. It's a nitpick.
I feel like in the books they talk about people have green hair, silver. Even they talk about Rhaegar has silver hair. You don't see anybody with any of these wacky hair colors on the TV show.
Not so much. I can live with that. It's fine.
Yeah.
Let's take this from the Muffin That Sucks, Katie D. Katie D writes in, what is up with the Darth Sparrows? An army of goons doesn't seem like the High Sparrow's style. Yeah, fair enough. I mean, we've only met the High Sparrow for like 5 seconds. So who are we to say that this isn't his style?
Yeah. Better forehead tattoos, Game of Thrones or Walking Dead?
Ooh. Well, I think this is more intricate. And The Walking Dead is just W's.
By the way, did you see Tyrese going crazy on the subway this weekend?
Of course I did. You emailed me about it.
You didn't comment. You didn't write back.
I was traumatized. I had nothing to say.
Poor Tyrese.
Poor Tyrese. There's a lot to be upset about. But yeah,
he should be in the High Sparrows.
He would be great. But yeah, I think that we just don't know enough about the High Sparrow to really comment on whether or not this is his style. He's obviously had very pious, he's a very pious man. He has a very strict interpretation of what is a sin and what is not. And even going back to last week, his introductory episode, he is only put on Cersei's radar because the Sparrows, because Lancel and a bunch of other people go into a brothel and kick the crap out of the High Septon, who is, having relations with all these women. So, and they strip him naked and march him in the streets, and they keep hitting his hand so that he has to show his junk to everybody. So even before we met the High Sparrow, these were on the High Sparrow's orders. So his tactics already are fairly ruthless. So is this out of character for the High Sparrow to have an army of Darth Sparrows? No, I don't think so. I think it's in character.
No, okay. Boy, you wonder if I bet Loras Tyrell, I bet Lancel Lannister could sit down and have a pretty interesting conversation with the High Sparrow at this point.
Yeah, what do you think he would have to say?
Hey, do you know I used to have sex with my cousin and that she made me kill the King Bobby Baratheon?
Yeah, it's so great that that Cersei has turned us into soldiers and given us all this cool power. By the way,
I think she has to join them. I think she has to become in one of these the High Sparrow people.
Cersei should?
Yeah. That's the move.
That'd be fun.
I think that's the move. And then she could just confess everything and then be born again.
Yeah. No, that's interesting.
I think that's a good move.
Okay.
All right. Because otherwise, that's the big problem that I have with her plan is that if she doesn't do that, aren't they going to say, hey, but what about you though? Aren't you a bad person?
Yeah, you poked a pretty big hole in her plan for sure.
Yeah. Okay. Here's one from Stephanie who says, is Cersei going to have Littlefinger killed once he gets to King's Landing? Yeah, I don't like this for Littlefinger.
Yeah, but Littlefinger's not just going to walk into this without some backup. I mean, I have a lot of faith in Littlefinger. Maybe too much, as I said before. But I don't feel like Littlefinger has done all of the stuff that he's done and just struts back into King's Landing without feeling decently good about his chances of walking out.
Yeah, but Littlefinger's brothels have seemed to have been the target. This is the second week in a row we've seen all of the High Sparrows people coming in and really flipping over the brothel.
Right.
And this is the second time we saw the guy who's like Littlefinger's assistant say, hey,
Oliver.
This is Littlefinger's brothel. Do you know who you're messing with?
Yeah, they don't seem to care. Yeah, who knows? Maybe Littlefinger's walking into more than he's bargaining for. But I trust in Peter Baelish's ability to outmaneuver these people.
Like I say, I'm not loving High Sparrow so far in season 5.
Well, we'll see. We'll see where it's going.
Faith Militant, High Sparrow. I feel like this is my least favorite story going on here in Game of Thrones season 5.
All right. Well, let's see. Let's see how it plays out.
I like seeing where it's going with Cersei, and I like that stuff. But this whole idea of this whole what am I calling them? The High Sparrows, or is that right?
You don't like Darth Sparrow? You don't think that was good?
I want to know the right name. I don't want to get.
There's the Faith Militant right now.
Okay, Faith Militant. Okay.
Call him the Faith Militant. Call him the Sparrows. Call him the High Sparrow. I think you're good.
Okay.
All right. Let's take one from Robert Miller. Robert Miller writes in, do you trust Melisandre, and is this the first time Melisandre was being dishonest towards Stannis?
Well, to be fair, Melisandre does not serve Stannis. She serves the Lord of Light.
Ding.
And that she thinks Stannis is a conduit to the Lord of Light. That's who Lord of Light wants. But again, at the end of the day, that's not her boss. Lord of Light is the boss.
Yeah, he's the boss man.
Stannis is middle management.
Middle management. But he's like high up middle management.
Sure. He's chosen king, but
the chosen manager.
Yes.
Mr. Manager.
Employee of the month.
Maester Manager.
Natalie in Chicago says, now that Dany's right-hand man is dead, will she be happy to see Ser Jorah, and what will her reaction be to Tyrion?
Yeah. So what's your ultimate prediction on this? Let's just play it out. Let's say that Jorah and Tyrion travel by map to Meereen. They get there happily in one piece in like a day, and Barristan has been freshly killed. What's her reaction to seeing these two walk in going to be?
Well, she's not going to be happy. She's going to be pissed at Ser Jorah. She's going to be pissed at Tyrion. And I think that she's going to be mad and say, like, Ser Jorah, I told you that if you came back here, I would have Dario kill you, and now you come back and bring a Lannister? Then I'm so mad. And then Tyrion's like, going to be like, hey, look, let me, you need my help.
Right.
And then win her over.
Okay.
You know? Maybe he'll have some sort of demonstration or something like that. I don't know. But... you know, it's going to be tense at first.
Sure. Yeah, I think that's fair. I don't think that there's, even if this has a happy ending, I think that there's going to be some thorns along the way towards that rosy end.
Queen of Thorns?
Queen of Thorns, let's hope so.
Okay, let's do what, 3 more questions?
Yeah, let's take 3 more. Okay. Let's take this from McGurkusk.
McGurk USC.
McGurk USC. I know how to read, Rob. Did you know this about me?
No.
McGurk says, will tonight's carnage encourage Dany to get the heck out of Meereen and over to Westeros? Well, you know what I think, Rob. I say, get out of there, you stupid idiot. Go home. Go home. Yeah, I think that would be nice. That would be nice. You'd like to think that this is going to galvanize her to realize maybe this whole Slavers Bay thing was not the best call. Maybe I got some other business elsewhere.
Yeah. So terrible.
Yeah.
All right. Spicy Wasabi says Sansa seems receptive of Littlefinger's kiss. She's playing the game right.
Or Littlefinger's got game, right?
Well, Littlefinger does have game. Everybody knows this. We heard how he made Lysa scream. He works in the brothel. He is definitely he knows what he's doing.
Number 2 behind Podrick Payne?
Boy, I think I think that Podrick has natural ability. I think that Littlefinger has learned his trade.
Educated.
He's educated.
Yeah.
Yes.
What is your
Sansa like it?
What is your read? Is Sansa feeling this? Is Sansa into Littlefinger's advance?
I don't think she hated it. I think she feels like she has very few friends. I feel like she feels like Littlefinger is her only friend. I feel like that she doesn't look at Littlefinger and hate him.
It'd be really nice, that now that Littlefinger is leaving and he's not going to be the only person that she's really having kind of confidential conversations with. It'd be great for her to have somebody that she can trust, somebody that she can talk to at like some level of transparency, and be able to just like talk about Littlefinger. Like, what is her true take on Littlefinger. I'd really like to hear that. I'd really like to hear her talking to, I don't know, if it's like that old lady who said the North remembers last week when Sansa gets settled into her room in Winterfell. If she could trust that lady and just be like, Littlefinger, not bad. He's pretty good.
Yeah.
Or the other direction, say, Littlefinger, not great.
Yeah.
Not great. I would just like to know. I'd like to know.
Sansa has like the Stockholm syndrome right now, that she's like that she doesn't have any other friends, and she's like her only friend, and
Right.
that's it, and that she's like kind of falling for Littlefinger, I think.
Maybe. Even if that's true, though, that sounds terrible.
He's like the charming, like older guy, like he always has good manners and stuff like that. Look, just compared to the other guys that Sansa has been with.
Yeah.
That Littlefinger is far and away. He's rich. He's older. It's like a 50 Shades of Grey thing, Josh.
He's like the Christian Grey of Westeros?
Yes.
So is he into bondage?
He's mysterious. Yes, he runs a whole whorehouse.
Yeah, he certainly has a red room of pain in there for sure.
Yes, he's rich. He's mysterious. He has land.
But he's probably got bad breath.
Why? Why do you say that?
He's such a mouth breather. He's just a bit of a mouth breather.
Yeah, but he's very charming.
Yeah,
He
counts.
Yeah, you wouldn't have gotten where he's gotten in life with bad breath.
Dangerous guy though.
Mm-hmm, sure.
It's a dangerous line of work he's gotten himself into.
Okay, and last question. Take this from R. Philly.
All right, from R. Philly, my boy R. Philly. R. Philly writes in, do you guys think Bronn was hoping Jaime would get killed so he could go back to his warm, soft wife and get the hell out of Dorne? I don't know. I think Bronn wants to trade up. I feel like Bronn's ambitious.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head with his warm, soft wife. Lawless, not.
We're not into Lawless.
Yeah.
We're out on Lawless.
Yeah.
LOL. Lists.
Yes. I think that Bronn is hoping that this deal pays off. Again, much like Littlefinger, Bronn is a betting man, and he's betting that hopefully this is going to work out for him, and he can end up with a boring death.
True.
What do you want, boring death or exciting death?
For Bronn or for me?
For you.
Boring death, right?
Yes, and boring life. I don't even want that life exciting.
Too craven for an exciting death.
Okay. All right. Speaking of being craven, this is from Jennifer Grasso. When is Josh going to talk about how he should have done SNL last night as Samuel Tarly? Or Sawmill Tarly, as the question said.
That's his wrestling name.
Yes. Josh, did you watch SNL this week?
I am aware of what's being discussed.
Yes. So they did on Weekend Update. They had the hottest couple in Westeros, Sam and Gilly.
That's right. I saw.
Yes, and I know you saw it, just in case people didn't watch it. It's a funny sketch. They did it sort of like where Sam and Gilly are like dealing with all the fame of being the hottest couple on Game of Thrones, because there are no other couples. Would you agree? Are Sam and Gilly the hottest couple on Game of Thrones?
Of course, I'd agree.
Yes. But what about Marjorie and Tommen?
Oh, they're really hot too, actually.
Yes.
Is that weird that I just said that about a kid who's supposed to be like 16 years old? He's 18 years old in real life.
He's 18. What about Missandei and Grey Worm?
They're missing something.
They're missing something? Doesn't that make it more romantic?
Something's missing.
Something's missing. What about Dany and Dario?
That's pretty good. You know I'm a big fan of Dario's booty.
That's the number one.
But they're not in Westeros.
Okay.
I mean, they've got Essos on lock. That's not a competition. They've got that under control.
Is it Sansa and Ramsay Bolton?
No, thumbs down. No,
is it Jon and Missandei?
No.
Melisandre?
He's not feeling that. I'm gonna give this to my boy Sawmill Tarly. I think Sawmill Tarly's got this. Sawmill and Gilly for sure.
All right, there you go.
But yes, I did see this, and I shouldn't say more. The post-show recaps lawyers are drafting a Raven as we speak.
Okay, there you go. All right, Josh.
Antonio Mazzaro is who I'm talking about.
Yes, Antonio's. He's going to sue SNL?
Yeah, the greatest avocado on post-show recaps.
Okay. All right. So, Josh, we need a hashtag for this episode.
What are we thinking?
Did we just get it? Is it Sawmill Tarly?
Sawmill Tarly? Could be that. Could be Goodbye Grandpa.
Goodbye Grandpa. Okay. Sure. I like the synergy there.
Let's do it.
All right. Kudos to Alex Kidwell for coming up with that in the chat room. All right. Josh, what's next for post-show recaps in terms of Game of Thrones coverage?
In terms of Game of Thrones covers, we've been dropping his name all night. My boy Antonio Mazzaro, he's going to be on the feedback show with me this week. We'll talk about everything that happened in this week's episode. You guys want to get in your voicemails, your questions, everything. Plenty of ways to do that. Postshowrecaps.com/voicemail. The voicemails are always fun, so definitely send some of those in. GOT@postshowrecaps.com is our email address that you can write into. You can also go through our feedback form, postshowrecaps.com/feedback. And you can tweet at Antonio and I. He's at AC Mazzaro, 2 Z's, 1 R, and I'm at Round Howard. You can get your questions in that way as well. We'll be tracking them down. We'll be looking in all the comment sections here on postshowrecaps.com and YouTube. We'll be making sure that everybody's well covered. Lots of questions to have after this week's episode. And then beyond that, I mean, as we discussed a little bit, breaking character a little bit here on the Sunday night recap. We talked a little bit about the book stuff. We will dive into that in a hardcore way on the book club this week with Terry Schwartz, which won't be live. We're going to record that offline. So definitely send your questions in through all the ways that I mentioned before, and just in whatever subject lines. Make sure to mark spoilers, Game of Thrones book club, whatever. But we will have those 2 podcasts coming up this week. So lots of fun stuff to talk about with a really crazy Game of Thrones.
Okay, and of course, we mentioned that Josh covered the Avengers this past weekend. Also, I recorded the SNL recap earlier tonight, so we've got all our bases covered.
Sounds good. Yeah, and if you like these Lost Lives podcasts that we do sometimes, keep an eye on your podcast feed this week.
Plus, we've got Orphan Black and much, much more. I did a very crazy episode of the Seinfeld recap this week, so a lot going on post-show recaps. Make sure you subscribe at postshowrecaps.com/iTunes for the full feed, or postshowrecaps.com/GOT iTunes for the Game of Thrones podcast feed. And we always appreciate your feedback and comments on iTunes. All right, everybody, looking forward to hearing what you guys have to say on postshowrecaps.com. Have a great week, and we'll talk to you again soon.